Hi, everyone. I just want to go through this sample online learning template that I created for the discipline of social studies. And so I just filled out the template that we've been sharing for helping the teachers to be able to organize their learning into weeks or biweekly sort of chunks so that students can see how everything fits together in this emergency crisis online setting. And so I used the C3 framework. This is up here. I used a middle school geography standard from C3. It's about human-induced environmental change and the impact that human-induced environmental change has on spatial patterns. And it also throws in the concept of spatial patterns in relation to conflict and cooperation. So it's a pretty big idea for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to comprehend. So the thing that's going to hold it all together is this question: how does environmental change influence spatial patterns of conflict and cooperation? And so that's my main question. And depending on who my kids are and whether or not I've taught these concepts, I sort of assumed that I haven't really taught those particular concepts yet. So then I broke it down into evidence of learning. I like to use I can statements or things that are really specific and student-friendly language so that they know they are being successful in this particular unit if they can do the following things. They can define long-term human-induced environmental change. That's one concept in that standard: long-term human-induced environmental change. And they can give examples of that. I can explain the relationship between environmental change and spatial patterns of conflict and cooperation and provide at least 2 examples. And then finally, because this standard says evaluate, I made sure I brought that verb over to the evidence of learning. I can evaluate the influences of long-term human-induced environmental change on spatial patterns of conflict and cooperation. And then the digital tools, these are the ones that my students will need. These are the ones that teachers will need. I just like to put that in there so that everybody knows what tools they need. And I just link to the actual download the apps or things like that. And then here's the learning experiences. So I do we want to connect with our students. I feel like that's a big thing. So I think people who are offering sort of office hours or like daily or every other day, just because secondary students have multiple teachers, multiple classes, so maybe every other day or once a week, we do like a Hangouts meet or something like that, where we can meet as a class. And it's recorded so that if for some reason the students can't log on at that time, they can go and watch it later. And so I thought the first step would be, I would model a think aloud about long-term impacts of spatial patterns of conflict and cooperation using the RLC example in Central Asia. And so I just have a click here for then I would do a concept attainment for this idea of this concept of long-term human-induced environmental change. And then maybe I'd do a 4-corner strategy for spatial patterns of conflict and cooperation, just so that students understood what these words mean. So first I would do a think aloud of how I would do this about a particular context like the RLC. And then I'd do a concept attainment of those 2 particular concepts. Those are our main 2 concepts. Midweek, maybe I'd have the students do an SEEI strategy about those 2 concepts and use their own examples. They can work together. They can have choice about how they produce it, video, PowerPoint, however they want to show me their work. And then they watch a screencast that I'll create about the Nile River water crisis, and they'll complete the graphic organizer that I want them to eventually use on the final task while they're watching me explain the Nile River crisis and how that is long-term human-induced environmental change and how it's causing both spatial patterns of conflict and spatial patterns of cooperation. Towards the end of week 1, maybe they would explore a new context. So I want them to transfer their understanding to a new context. And so I found this awesome visual of graphics about droughts in the Western United States. And they would use a strategy to analyze that particular situation. They're looking for human-induced long-term environmental change and its impact on spatial patterns of conflict and cooperation. Maybe early in week 2, I would do a Google Hangouts meet again to make sure we review the key points, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure everybody's understanding what these words mean and how they show up in these different situations. And then finally, towards the end of that week, I would want them to do this real world connection where they're looking at the palm industry, the palm oil industry, and again, reviewing a multimedia presentation. So very similar to the one they did over here, where they are going to create a short public service announcement advocating whether or not consumers should buy products with palm oil. So that's my quick video of this, and I hope you guys enjoy.